The twin suns of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Haven Colony as Jake Morrison wiped grease from his hands with a worn cloth. Another day, another broken atmospheric processor. The frontier life suited him. Quiet, predictable, far from the chaos of his military past. At 32, the former lieutenant commander had traded his pulse rifle for hydrospanners, and he'd never looked back. Until she walked into his workshop. Jake's breath caught in his throat as the tall figure stepped through the doorway, silhouetted against the amber evening light. Even after 8 years, he would recognize that graceful stride anywhere. Kaylin. Her skin still held that ethereal silver-blue shimmer that marked her as Velothi, and her luminous violet eyes swept the cluttered space before settling on him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "Hello, Jake." Her voice carried the same melodic undertone he remembered, though now it held an authority that hadn't been there before. She wore elegant diplomatic robes instead of battle armor, but Jake could see the warrior's bearing beneath the refined exterior. Kaylin. He set down his tools with deliberate care, his mind racing. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I imagine not." She stepped aside, and Jake's world tilted on its axis. A small boy, perhaps 7 years old, peered around her robes with curious eyes that were unmistakably human in shape, but held flecks of violet that marked his mixed heritage. His hair was dark like Jake's, but with an otherworldly sheen that caught the light. The child's skin bore the faintest hint of Kaylin's silver undertone, creating an almost luminous quality. Jake's legs suddenly felt unsteady. "Who is?" "His name is Orion," Kaylin said, her hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder. "He's yours." The words hit Jake like a kinetic blast. He gripped the workbench edge, staring at the child who was studying him with intelligent, evaluating eyes. The resemblance was undeniable. The shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, even the way he tilted his head when curious. "Mine?" Jake's voice came out rough. "But how? I mean, we only..." He glanced at Kaylin, memories of that single night 8 years ago flooding back with startling clarity. "One night was apparently enough," she replied, a hint of dry humor in her tone. Velothi human compatibility was previously untested. Orion stepped forward, unintimidated by Jake's stunned silence. "Are you really my father?" he asked in accented standard, his young voice carrying an oddly formal cadence. Jake knelt slowly, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. Up close, the hybrid nature was even more apparent, human bone structure softened by Velothi grace, creating something entirely new and beautiful. Yes, I think I am." "Mother says you saved her during the war." Orion's violet-flecked eyes searched Jake's face. "She says you're brave." Jake glanced up at Kaylin, who was watching the interaction with carefully controlled emotions. "Your mother was the brave one. I just did what anyone would do." "No," Kaylin said quietly. "You did what a good man would do. There's a difference." The weight of the moment settled around them like a physical presence. Jake's carefully constructed quiet life was crumbling, but as he looked at this impossible child, his son, he found he couldn't bring himself to mourn its loss. "Why, now?" he asked, standing slowly. "Why come here after all this time?" Kaylin's expression grew serious. "Because the galaxy is changing, Jake, and Orion may be the key to everything, but first we need to talk. There are things you need to know and threats you need to understand." Jake looked from her to their son, feeling the familiar weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. Some things it seemed you could never truly leave behind. 8 years ago, Altair Station, contested space. The explosions had stopped 3 hours ago, but Lieutenant Jake Morrison kept his rifle ready as he picked through the twisted wreckage of what had once been a research outpost. The three-way battle between human colonial forces, the Velothi Empire, and the savage Xerian collective had left nothing but destruction in its wake. That's when he heard the soft moan. Jake moved carefully toward the sound, his enhanced combat suit's sensors picking. Up a faint life signature beneath a collapsed support beam. What he found made him pause. A Velothi female, her silver-blue skin marred by burns and cuts, trapped but alive. Enemy or not, she was clearly dying. Easy, he murmured, setting down his weapon and working to free her. I've got you. Her violet eyes fluttered open, filled with pain and confusion. Human, she whispered in accented standard. Yeah. And you're Velothi. Guess that makes us even. Jake managed to lift the beam enough for her to crawl free. Can you walk? She tried and nearly collapsed. Jake caught her, feeling the surprising warmth of her skin despite its alien hue. The Xerians will return, she gasped. This sector. Not safe. I know a place. Jake helped her to her feet, supporting her weight. Abandoned mining station about 2 clicks north, can you make it? She nodded, though he could see the effort it cost her. I am Kalen of House Thyros. Jake Morrison, 3rd Colonial Marines. He adjusted his grip as they began walking. Nice to meet you, I guess. The journey took them 4 painful hours. By the time they reached the hidden mining station, Kalen was unconscious, and Jake was carrying her entirely. The station's emergency power still functioned, providing basic life support and medical supplies. For 3 days, Jake tended her wounds with military field medicine and salvaged Velothi medical tech from her damaged armor. During her fevered recovery, she spoke in her native tongue, musical words that somehow conveyed both strength and vulnerability. On the 4th day, she woke fully lucid. You could have left me, she said, sitting up carefully on the makeshift bed he'd created. Jake was cleaning his rifle nearby. Could have, didn't want to. Why? Her violet eyes studied him intently. We are enemies. My people and yours have killed each other for 3 years. You're not my enemy right now. Right now you're just someone who needed help. He looked up at her. Besides, the Xerians are everyone's enemy. They would have tortured you for information before killing you. Nobody deserves that. Something shifted in her expression. You are different than what we are taught about humans. Yeah? What are you taught? That you are savage, brutal, that you take what you want without thought for others. She touched the bandages he'd applied with surprising gentleness. But you risked yourself for me. You gave me your rations when I was too weak to hunt. You are honorable. Their eyes met across the small space, and Jake felt something electric pass between them. Maybe we're all just people trying to survive in a messed-up galaxy. By the 6th day, her wounds had healed enough for her to move freely. Jake had been preparing to leave to try reaching the evacuation point, but something kept him lingering. They talked for hours, about their worlds, their families, their dreams, before the war. Despite everything, he found himself drawn to her intelligence, her dry humor, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed. On the 7th night, as they shared their last meal together, the tension that had been building finally reached its breaking point. Tomorrow you leave, Kalen said softly, staring into the small heating unit that served as their campfire. Yeah, and you go back to your people. And we become enemies again. Jake set down his cup and moved closer to her. Do we have to be? She looked up at him, her alien features beautiful in the soft light. What are you saying? I'm saying that when I look at you, I don't see an enemy. I see someone incredible, who makes me want to believe this war doesn't have to define us. Kalen's breath caught as he reached out to trace the delicate markings along her cheekbone. Jake, tell me to stop, he whispered, his face inches from hers. Instead, she closed, the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was both tender and desperate. Her skin felt like silk beneath his hands as they came together with the passion of 2 souls who knew they were stealing moments from an impossible situation. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with reverent touches and whispered endearments. Her alien physiology complemented his human form in ways that felt both foreign and perfectly natural. When she cried out his name in the throes of passion, it sounded like music, Afterward, they lay entwined, her silver blue, skin luminous against his darker complexion. "This changes nothing," she whispered against his chest, though her voice lacked conviction. "Everything," he corrected, pressing his lips to her hair. "This changes everything." But morning came anyway, bringing with it the harsh reality of duty and war. They parted with one final kiss, both knowing they might never see each other again, neither knowing that their single night of love had created something extraordinary. Present day. Haven Colony. Jake's small kitchen had never felt so cramped. Orion sat at the table, methodically eating synthesized eggs while studying everything around him with those unsettling violet-flecked eyes. Kaylin stood by the window, her diplomatic composure intact despite the domestic chaos of an impromptu breakfast. "He doesn't eat much," Jake observed, watching his son push food around his plate. "Velothi children require less sustenance than humans," Kaylin explained. "But Orion's hybrid nature means his nutritional needs are unique. He processes protein differently and can photosynthesize minimal energy from sunlight." Jake blinked. "He can what now?" Orion looked up, a small smile playing at his lips, the first real expression Jake had seen from him. "Watch." The boy moved to a patch of morning sunlight streaming through the window. As Jake watched in amazement, Orion's skin took on a subtle luminous quality, the silver undertones becoming more pronounced. "That's..." Jake struggled for words. "That's incredible." "There are other differences," Kaylin said carefully. "His reflexes are enhanced beyond human or Velothi norms. His learning capacity is remarkable. He's already fluent in 6 languages. And he has an intuitive understanding of technology that surprises even our scientists." As if to demonstrate, Orion wandered over to Jake's broken comm unit and, after studying it for mere seconds, began manipulating components with startling precision. Within minutes, the device hummed to life. "How did you..." Jake began. "It wanted to work," Orion said simply, as if that explained everything. "I just helped it remember how." Jake sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "This is insane. Yesterday I was fixing atmospheric processors. Now I have a son who can..." He gestured helplessly at the now functioning comm unit. Kaylin moved closer, her hand brushing his shoulder. "I know it's overwhelming. But Jake, you need to understand, Orion isn't just remarkable because of what he can do. He's remarkable because of who he is. In 8 years of war, he's the first successful human Velothi hybrid. The only one." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," she said, settling into the chair beside him, "that he represents something entirely new. A bridge between our species that could change the course of the war. My government believes he could be the key to a lasting alliance." Jake felt a chill of foreboding. "And your government knows about him?" "Of course. As does yours now." Word spreads quickly in diplomatic circles. Kaylin's expression grew troubled. "That's part of why I came. There are those on both sides who see Orion as either a valuable asset or a dangerous unknown. And the Syrians." "What about the Syrians?" "They see him as an abomination. Something to be destroyed before it can upset the balance of the war." Jake's protective instincts flared. "Over my dead body." Kaylin's eyes softened. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." Over the following days, Jake threw himself into learning about his son. Orion was remarkably patient with his father's fumbling attempts at parenting, though he had an unsettling way of staring that made Jake feel like he was being analyzed. "Why didn't you look for me sooner?" Jake asked one evening as they walked through the colony's small market district. "I intended to," Kaylin replied, her voice carefully neutral. "But when I discovered I was pregnant, my family confined me. A hybrid child was unprecedented. They needed time to understand what it meant." "So you were alone through all of it?" She nodded, though Jake caught the flash of old pain in her eyes. "Velothi births are typically easier than human ones, but Orion's mixed heritage made it complicated. There were moments when I thought I might lose him." Her voice dropped. "Or that he might lose me." Jake stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Kaylin, I'm sorry. If I had known, you would have, abandoned your military duties? Started an interplanetary incident by demanding access to Velothi space? She shook her head. No, Jake, what happened, happened. We survived. Orion is here, healthy and whole. That's what matters. That night, after putting Orion to bed in Jake's small spare room, the adults found themselves alone for the first time since the reunion. The tension that had been building for days finally came to a head. I never stopped thinking about you, Jake said quietly as they stood on his small porch, watching the colony's lights twinkle in the darkness. Nor I you. Kaylin moved closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. That night, it wasn't just passion for me, Jake, it was love. I knew it even then. He turned to her, reaching out to cup her face as he had years ago. Then why does this feel so complicated? Because love was simpler when we thought we'd never see each other again. Her hand covered his. Now we have a child, responsibilities, entire governments watching our every move. Do you regret it? Any of it? Never. She leaned into his touch. Do you? Instead of answering with words, Jake kissed her. This time there was no desperation, no sense of stolen moments. This kiss spoke of reunion, of hope, of a future they might actually have together. When they finally parted, both were breathing, hard. The guest room is yours for as long as you want it, Jake said softly. Kaylin smiled, the expression transforming her diplomatic mask into something warm and real. Just the guest room? Jake's pulse quickened. Well, that depends on what you want. Her answer was another kiss, deeper this time, full of promise and possibility. The attack came at dawn. Jake jerked awake to the sound of energy weapons discharging outside his home. Through his bedroom window, he could see dark shapes moving between the colony buildings, hulking forms that could only be Xerion shock troops in their distinctive chitinous armor. Kaylin! He burst from his room to find her already moving, her diplomatic robes replaced by form-fitting combat gear that highlighted every curve while providing maximum protection. I heard them, she said grimly, checking her sidearm. Where's Orion? They rushed to the spare room to find it empty, the window open and curtains fluttering in the morning breeze. No, Jake breathed. But Kaylin was already moving to the window. There, she pointed to a cluster of storage buildings about 200 meters away. I can see heat signatures, 3 Xerion soldiers and something smaller. Jake's blood ran cold. They have him. Not for long. Kaylin's voice carried deadly promise, as she pulled additional weapons from a pack Jake hadn't noticed before. I didn't come here unprepared. They moved through the colony like ghosts, Jake's military training meshing perfectly with Kaylin's diplomatic security skills. The Xerions had landed a small strike craft at the colony's edge, clearly a targeted operation, not a random raid. How did they know? Jake whispered as they took cover behind an overturned cargo hauler. Someone leaked intelligence about Orion's location, Kaylin replied. This was planned. They were 50 meters from the storage building when everything went wrong. A Xerion soldier emerged from behind a shipping container, weapon raised, chittering something in their harsh language. Jake dove left as energy bolts scorched the air where he'd been standing. The firefight was brief but intense. Jake's pulse rifle found 2 targets while Kaylin moved with fluid grace, her shots precise and lethal. But it was what happened next that changed everything. As they approached the building where Orion was being held, the structure suddenly erupted in brilliant light. When their vision cleared, they found 3 Xerion soldiers unconscious on the ground, and Orion standing in the center of the room, his hybrid skin glowing with energy patterns Jake had never seen before. I told them to stop, Orion said calmly, as if disabling armed soldiers was something he did regularly. They wouldn't listen. Jake stared at his son in amazement and growing concern. How did you? The energy wanted to help, Orion explained, with 7-year-old logic. I just asked it nicely. Kalen knelt beside one of the unconscious Xerians, checking for life signs. They're alive but completely stunned. Orion, what exactly did you do? I made their machines sleep, he said. Their armor, their weapons, even the little things in their blood that make them strong. I asked them to rest for a while. Jake and Kalen exchanged looks over their son's head. If Orion could disable Xerian bioenhancements with a thought, his abilities were far beyond what either of them had imagined. We need to leave, Kalen said urgently. This was a scouting force. More will come. They made it back to Jake's home to find it ransacked but empty. As they gathered essential supplies, Kalen's communication device chimed with an incoming priority message. Ambassador Kalen, a voice said in formal Velothi. You are to return to the diplomatic station immediately. The child is to be surrendered to proper authorities for evaluation. Jake's jaw tightened. Like hell he is, Kalen smiled grimly as she shut off the communicator. My thoughts exactly. That evening, hidden in an abandoned mining facility Jake knew from his survey work, they finally had time to process what had happened. They're all afraid of him, Jake said, as he watched Orion sleep, the boy's hybrid features peaceful in the dim light. Our governments, the Xerions, everyone. Can you blame them? Kalen settled beside Jake on the makeshift bedding they'd arranged. He's 8 years old and he can disable military-grade equipment with his mind. What will he be capable of when he's fully grown? He's just a child, Jake said fiercely. Our child. Kalen leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. I know. But the galaxy doesn't see him that way. They see a weapon, or a threat, or a tool to be used. Jake turned to face her, his hands framing her face in the dim light. Then we protect him, whatever it takes. Even if it means running for the rest of our lives, even then. Jake's voice was resolute. He's our son, Kalen, and he deserves better than being some government science project. She kissed him then, soft and desperate, and Jake felt the familiar fire ignite between them. Their lovemaking, that night was different from their first time. No longer the careful exploration of strangers, but the desperate reunion of souls who had found each other again against impossible odds. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Kalen traced patterns on Jake's chest with her fingers. There might be another way, she said quietly. What do you mean? What if we could broker a real peace? Not just a ceasefire, but an actual alliance between our species. She looked up at him. Orion proves it's possible for our races to not just coexist, but to create something new together. Jake considered this. You're talking about using our son as a symbol. I'm talking about using our family as proof that there's hope for something better than endless war. Her eyes burned with conviction. But only if that's what you want. Only if we do it together. Jake looked over at their sleeping son, then back at the woman who had changed his life twice now. Together, he agreed, whatever comes next, we face it together. Outside their shelter, the night sky was filled with the lights of approaching ships, human, Velothi, and others. The galaxy was converging on their small family, but for the first time since Kalen's return, Jake felt something other than fear. He felt hope. The standoff lasted 3 days. Jake stood at the entrance to the mining facility, his rifle lowered but ready, facing a semicircle of ships from 3 different species. Human colonial marines, Velothi diplomatic guards, and even a small Xerion cruiser maintained positions around the facility, none willing to make the first move. Inside, Kalen worked frantically on her diplomatic channels, while Orion practiced controlling his abilities, his hybrid nature seeming to grow stronger each day. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Colonial Fleet, a voice crackled over the facility's comm system. Jake Morrison, you're harboring valuable assets. Stand down and no one gets hurt. Jake keyed the communicator. The valuable assets are my family, Chen, and they're not going anywhere. Mr. Morrison, a new voice interrupted, melodious Velothi tones. This is High Ambassador Theron. The child must be returned for proper evaluation. His power is too dangerous to remain uncontrolled. And this is War Leader Scrix of the Xerion Collective, a third voice chittered through the comm. The abomination must be destroyed before it corrupts the natural order. Jake looked back at Kalen and Orion. His sun was glowing softly again, the energy patterns under his skin responding to his emotional state. Well, Jake said dryly, at least we know where everyone stands. It was Orion who broke the stalemate. Boy walked past Jake to stand in the facility's entrance, clearly visible to all the ships above. When he spoke, his young voice somehow carried clearly across the distance without technological amplification. I know you're all scared of me, he said. I would be scared too if I were you. But I'm not your enemy. I'm proof that we don't have to be enemies at all. Jake felt a familiar energy pulse as Orion's abilities manifested again, but this time it was different. Instead of the targeted disruption he'd used on the Xerion soldiers, this felt like communication. Like his son was somehow reaching out to every mind in the assembled fleet. You've been fighting for so long that you've forgotten how to stop, Orion continued. But look at me. I'm human and Velothi and something new all at once. I'm not broken. I'm not wrong. I'm just different. And different doesn't have to be dangerous. The comm channels had gone silent. Jake could see figures moving on the ships above, and he had the strange sensation that everyone was listening, really listening, not just to Orion's words, but to something deeper. My father saved my mother when they were supposed to be enemies, Orion said. They loved each other when love was supposed to be impossible, and they made me when everyone said our species couldn't create life together. If they can change the rules, why can't all of you? The silence stretched for long minutes. Then, to Jake's amazement, the Xerion cruiser began to withdraw. War Leader Scrix to all vessels. The chittering voice returned. The young one speaks, strangely, of wisdom. The collective will consider new approaches. One by one, the other ships began powering down their weapon systems. Commander Chen's voice came through the comm, tinged with wonder. Morrison, what the hell is your kid? Jake looked down at Orion, who was smiling up at him with innocent pride.
He's Hope, Chen. He's Hope. 6 months later, the new Tri-Species Alliance headquarters was still under construction, but the main conference hall was functional enough to host the historic peace signing.
Jake stood at the back of the room, wearing his old dress uniform for the occasion, watching as representatives from humanity, the Velothi Empire, and even the Xerion Collective signed the documents that would end a decade of war. Kalen, resplendent, in her formal ambassador robes, caught his eye from across the room and smiled. In the month since the standoff, she had become the youngest High Ambassador in Velothi history, her role as Orion's mother giving her unprecedented influence in the new alliance. Orion himself sat in the front row, wearing a specially designed outfit that incorporated elements from all three cultures. At 8 years old, he was already being called the Bridge Builder, though he insisted he just wanted to help people stop fighting so much. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, the Human Secretary General announced, I present to you the architect of our new peace, Ambassador Kalen of House Thyrus and her family. Jake joined Kalen and Orion on the small stage as cameras from across the galaxy captured the moment. The family that had started as an impossible love story between enemies had become the symbol of a new age. Any words for the gathered delegates? A reporter called out. Kalen stepped forward, her diplomat's training evident. This alliance proves that our differences can be our strength, not our weakness. That love and hope can triumph over fear and hatred. That the future we build together will be brighter than anything we could have achieved alone. But it was Orion who had the last word. My mom and dad taught me that being different isn't scary, he said, his young voice carrying clearly through the hall. It's just another way of being amazing. And if we can all remember that, maybe we can do amazing things together. Later that evening, as the celebrations continued around them, Jake and Kalen found themselves alone on a balcony overlooking New Geneva City. Orion was inside, charming diplomats from 3 species with his mixture of childish enthusiasm and startling insight. Hard to believe it's only been a year since you walked into my workshop, Jake said, pulling Kalen close. Has it been what you expected? She asked, leaning into his embrace. Jake considered the question as he looked out at the city lights, human architecture blending with Velothi organic curves, and even some Xerion geometric patterns. Their son's laughter drifted from inside, mixing with the voices of beings who had been mortal enemies mere months ago. "No," he said finally. "It's been better." Kaylin turned in his arms, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. "I love you, Jake Morrison." "I love you too, Ambassador Thyros." He kissed her softly, marveling again at how perfectly they fit together despite their differences. "Ready for whatever comes next?" "With you and Orion?" "I'm ready for anything." As if summoned by their words, Orion appeared in the doorway, his hybrid features glowing softly in the evening light. "Are you two being mushy again?" he asked with 8-year-old directness. Jake laughed, scooping his son into a hug. "Guilty as charged." "Good," Orion said seriously. "The galaxy needs more mushy. It makes everything work better." Looking out at the peaceful city, at the mixed crowds celebrating below, at his impossible family, Jake had to agree. The universe was vast and full of unknowns, but for the first time in his life, Jake Morrison wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. After all, he had love, he had family, and he had hope. In the end, that was enough to change everything.